We talked a bit last week about miracles. God had performed so many miracles for the children of Israel. The plagues that got them out of Egypt in the first place, miracles. God making a path through the Red Sea so they could walk through on dry land, miracle. Pillars of fire and cloud that guided the people, miracles. God bringing a fog down and confusing Pharaoh's chariots so they couldn't even catch kids walking, miracle. God fed them with bread from heaven in the wilderness, miracle. God providing bread from heaven reminded us of Jesus performing the miracle of making one boy's packed lunch feed over 5,000 people, and how Jesus said that while people needed bread to eat for their bodies to survive, that Jesus was the real bread from heaven, and that people needed Jesus to live forever. So let's leave the children of Israel in the wilderness for now. Don't worry, they'll still be there when we come back. They were there for a long time. And let's look at another miracle that Jesus performed. First though, what exactly is a miracle? Well, what do these three things have in common? The plagues in Egypt, making a path through the Red Sea, feeding 5,000 people with one lunch. They are all impossible. Only God could make these things happen. Sometimes we say that something is a miracle when we just mean that it's really, really unlikely. Matthew cleaning his room? Miracle. Eloise going to bed without coming back downstairs at least twice? A miracle. The Tesco driver arriving an hour early when we have no food left for dinner? A miracle. But they're not really miracles. We often say miracle when we just mean amazing or good timing. A miracle is something that only God can do. A miracle isn't just unlikely to happen, it's something that is impossible to happen. But God makes it happen, and God makes it happen at just the right time. And a miracle always shows how great God is. God brought the plagues in Egypt and separated the Red Sea to prove to the children of Israel that it was God who had chosen them and was leading them. When Jesus fed over 5,000 people from one packed lunch, he proved that God was with him in the same way that the miracle bread from heaven called manna proved that God was with Moses as he led the children of Israel. What it really showed was not just that God was with Jesus, but that Jesus was God. But Jesus' friends didn't realize that yet. Later that day, after everyone had gone home to bed full of food, Jesus' friends went down the hill to the Sea of Galilee, which is a big lake. They got into a boat and started sailing across. It was quicker than walking round the edge. It was dark. The Sea of Galilee can be a windy place. The wind gets funneled by the hills around and blows across the lake at weird angles and high speeds. Well, tonight was going to be a night of weather that they would never forget. It started to blow. But that's okay. Some of these guys were fishermen. They'd been out on this lake in worse weather catching fish. The wind picked up. They put the sail down and picked up their oars. Where did this wind come from? We'll be okay, right? You're used to this weather. Is this normal? Well, the fishermen aboard the boat knew that they were in trouble. Pull harder, boys! It was now well into the early hours of the morning. They had wanted to cut across the lake, but by now the wind had pushed them further out. They were now right in the middle of the Sea of Galilee, about a mile or two from the shore. But in all of this weather, where was Jesus? Jesus had gone up to the hill to be alone, praying. When he finished praying, he looked out onto the water. The Bible tells us that Jesus saw the men in the lake, making no progress and in a lot of trouble. How did Jesus see them all that far away in a storm? Well, maybe that's a miracle, or maybe that's just the nature of who Jesus is, God. But that's what the Bible says. He saw them straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Very early in the morning, he came toward them, walking on the sea. Cool. Jesus walked out to them. Hold on. Jesus walked out to them? I thought you said that Jesus was on a hill. Yep, that's right. But they're in a boat? Yep. On the water? Yes. In a storm? Uh-huh. A storm so big that even professional fishermen were having trouble? Yes. Jesus walked. Jesus walked out onto the water in the storm. Not into the water, not swimming, not under the water. Jesus walked on the water. It's about 3 a.m. now, the middle of the night, and Jesus walked out to his friends. He was going to walk right up close to the boat. In the middle of a stormy night, when you're exhausted and scared, well, what do you think that his friends thought? Maybe it's a ghost. All of his friends saw Jesus and they were terrified. But Jesus spoke to them. Have courage. It is I am. Do not be afraid. No, I didn't misspeak. Jesus said, it is I am. I am is the way that God describes himself. Before the world was, I am. It showed who Jesus was, not a magician, but God. When his friends heard Jesus say this, Peter, one of the fishermen, spoke up. Lord, if it's really you, then please tell me to come out to you on the water with you. And Jesus said, come. And so Peter stood up in the boat. The boat was still rocking on the waves. The wind was still blowing. This fisherman who knew the power of the wind and the waves to destroy boats and lives was prepared to step out of the boat and trusting only in Jesus and Jesus' power to step onto the water. Jesus looked at Jesus as he put his foot down. It didn't go under the water. It was like he was standing on land. He put his other foot down. The same thing happened. He looked at Jesus standing there and started to walk towards him. Can this really be happening? Am I walking on the water in the middle of this storm? I mean, look at... Peter took his eyes off of Jesus and started to look around at the wind and the waves and the spray that was hitting him. He was walking on water, on water! Peter started worrying. He'd taken his eyes off of Jesus, but now his head and his heart, they weren't focused on Jesus either. They were looking at the watery world around him, and he was afraid. And as he lost his focus on Jesus, whose power was letting Peter walk on the water, Peter started to sink. He didn't just fall, but slowly his feet, then his ankles, then his knees, and the fear built. He was terrified, realizing where he was. He had a moment of clarity. He needed help. He needed to be saved from this watery grave, but who could? Jesus! Peter lifted his eyes again and saw Jesus still standing right there and cried out, Lord, save me. Peter was afraid. Jesus was completely calm and in control. He reached out his hand and took Peter's and said, why do you have so little faith? Why did you doubt? As Jesus held Peter's hands, the waves became solid ground for Peter to walk on, and Peter and Jesus walked back into the boat. As soon as Jesus stepped into the boat, the storm stopped. Immediately, not slowing down, it just stopped. Don't ask me how, but his friends hadn't really understood what it meant when Jesus fed all those thousands of people earlier in the day. But this was something else. Jesus walked on water. He had walked right out across the water, and then Peter on it too. And then the storm stopped. They understood this. They understood this, that no man controlled the wind and the waves, but this man, Jesus. They did the only thing they could do. They worshipped Jesus. They said, truly you are the Son of God. In only a few minutes they were back on the shore. Much more happened after that, but Jesus' friends saw Jesus in a whole new way. He commanded everything. No one can walk on water. No one can allow someone else to walk on water. No one can command nature itself to do their bidding. No one except God. The friends recognized this. They said, truly, you are the Son of God. And what about the timing? Well, it happened when they were in the middle of the lake, when they realized that they were not going to get out of this on their own, when their own strength had failed them. They would never be able to say that it was nature or anything other than a true miracle of God. It also happened at 3 a.m, so only those people who Jesus wanted to see his true nature right then would see it. So what do the miracles prove? They prove that Jesus was God, that Jesus is God. And just as God gave the children of Israel bread in the desert and made a path through the Red Sea, so Jesus fed the 5,000 on the hill and made a path on the Sea of Galilee. Jesus is God. So what are we going to do about that? Well, reading the Bible would be a good start to learn more about Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke and John each wrote a book to tell us all about him. And as we learn about him, we should try to follow him, to do the things Jesus taught. Jesus is God. He lived a perfect life that we can read about in the Bible. We're not perfect. We've let God down and we've let ourselves down. We've thought and said and done wrong things, but God has provided a way for us to be perfect. Jesus took all our wrongdoing, all the punishment for all our wrongdoing on the cross. If we accept what Jesus has done for us, say sorry to God and follow Jesus, then God will forgive us all our wrongdoing and take us to be with him when we die so that we can live with him forever. Now that's a miracle. It's something only God could do. It happens at just the right time, and it shows how great God is. I believe in miracles and I've put my faith in Jesus. How about you? Thank you for listening.